You're listening to Crossing the Axis, the podcast that explores the commercial side of film production, with your host, James Keblas.
Welcome, listeners, and thank you for tuning in to the show. Today's episode is for production company owners who want to elevate their value when working directly with brand clients by stepping into the roles traditionally held by ad agencies. As more brands bring strategy and creative work in-house and bypass traditional agencies, this shift creates an opportunity for production companies to become deeper creative partners. But let's not underestimate the challenges. The work of ad agencies is far more complex than it seems. Beyond selling ideas through to decision makers and managing accounts, you have to think strategically and take on a higher level of the campaign success or failure on your shoulders. Creating effective ads isn't just about storytelling or landing a great joke. It requires an understanding of the mechanics of a successful campaign, like marketing funnels, audience data, and the strategic thinking that drives media placement, all within the context of video. To be an effective creative partner, you're not just delivering great content, you're providing solutions that inspire specific actions. To help us navigate this shift, I'm thrilled to welcome Alex Cohn to the show. Alex is a partner and head of content at the legendary agency Zambezi, as well as their production entity, Fin Studios. He has deep experience in both agency and production roles, and if I do my job correctly, I'll pry out some actionable strategies for production companies to better adopt that agency mindset. So let's dive in. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you, James. I'm really excited to be here.
Great.
Fan and listener of, there's so much good stuff on your podcast. I really dig it.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Well, I am a fan of you. I'm a fan of Zambezi. I use the word legendary to describe that because I actually have known about Zambezi since probably around 2014 or 2015. I don't know how. I think it was at a South by Southwest conference. Somehow I ended up on your newsletter. And I don't know how that happened, but I ended up on your newsletter. And I remember getting it at the first time and I thought, oh my God, this is so good. And it's been one of those newsletters for years that when it landed in my inbox, I couldn't delete it. I had to read it because it offered such smart information. And you've continued on this legacy so well. When I have a lot of clients that I help try to, grow their business and, BizDev and all that kind of stuff. And when I talk about newsletters and the value of newsletters, I say, if you want to do a good newsletter, which you should, Zambezi is the model. Like I could do this whole podcast on just your newsletter. It's so good.
I'm happy to introduce you to the strategy team that has kept the flame alive for many years of our Bytes newsletter. It's great. It's really a good read. We really try to make it it's not about us. It's literally just about culture and sort of what is going on in the world. It's really fun. It's a good read.
That's why it's so good, because it is about the world, the zeitgeist, the marketplace, whatever of where people are operating in the advertising world and what they need to know. It's thematic at times and it just does a deep dive and it makes everybody smarter. And I think you even do it in a way that shows off your competition even. I mean, I think that you kind of put it out there in all of its glory, whether you did it or you're involved with it or you thought of it or not.
Oh, 100%. It's just curated culture. There's so much out there and you never know what to read. And really it's just for interested people who are interested in the world that we live in. Here are some things that are going on that you might find interesting. And it's really not like tooting our horn. I mean, I'll toot the horn of the people here who make it because it's really readable and really cool. But it's about the bigger world and what's going on. And we just make it for people to go, oh, that's interesting. And that's cool.
There's a great sales book called The Challenger Sale. And I think it was from the 2010 or 2011 or somewhere around there. And it's got this philosophy in it around, kind of a teach, tailor, and take control and how that works. You all do it perfectly. You do the playbook so well. It's one of the best sales books I've ever read, and you just do it perfectly. So anyway, that's why I call you legendary. You have all of the hardware to prove it too. You have Clio awards. You just won a bunch of Clio awards. You guys have been around for a long time, which is a testament to itself in this industry. It's cool to be having this conversation. So I'm excited about it.
And speaking of awards, again, not to toot our own home board, we can talk about it. in the awards, this is the first time I think we've won sort of on both sides. Some were just us doing production only, and some were for agency and production. So I'm excited to talk about both of those things because it's a brave new world out there.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted you on the show, because you have such deep experience in both of those worlds. And I want to get into this crash course of that kind of agency mindset and thinking like an agency. Paint a picture of Zambezi and what Zambezi is, what Finn is, and what you have school and you have scale. Yeah, so all of this in the thematic Zambezi shark kind of idea. Give the complete picture. How does it work?
Yeah, of course. So Chris and Gene, who are the principal owners, and Gene is the CEO, again, come from that real legacy, traditional, but like really fantastic creative world of Wyden and Fallon and places like that, right? So some of the best creative minds, some of the best, biggest brands and campaigns you've ever seen, and put it in a boutique format that could move a little quicker and be a little more agile, right? And that's sort of the ethos. Zambezi, the name actually comes from, this was something Kobe and Chris and the guys came up before I came along, but the name Zambezi refers to a shark, what they call a bull shark in Africa. It's the Zambezi River, or what we call bull shark here. It's the Zambezi shark in Africa. And it's the only shark that swims in freshwater and saltwater. So it is very nimble. It's a little bit aggressive. It's got that sort of like those Kobe vibes, as he was sort of, the godfather of some of this stuff, but really being tuned into culture, being adaptable and fast. And for the first part of the journey, really working as a traditional agency. Coca-Cola, like I said, was sort of one of our first partners. So we did Vitamin Water, which is part of the Coca-Cola. And the Coca-Cola marketing team, again, world class, right? You built this global company, and the marketing is no small part of what they do. I would say it's a huge part of what they do, and they take it really seriously, right? Lots of layers, lots of smart people, lots of process of how they come to. They don't just like sit around for a week and come up with a campaign. It's like a lot of work. And so really learning the tradition of how that works is sort of a little bit where we came from, and we sort of spread our tentacles out from there. And to this day, some of our key clients came from some of those people that we met in those businesses who have moved on to other roles at other companies and things like that. So as we are looking at the landscape of our partners and what they needed, I would say, in the past 10 years, the explosion of content, right? And the needs beyond, before, probably a little bit before my time, right? All you needed was a 30-second TV ad and a print ad and maybe a out-of-home board and a radio spot or whatever. But the explosion of content and digital media and social media and all these things have created this need for more and more things. So I think what we saw, or what we started to do in terms of moving away, not away from, but augmenting the traditional, we're an agency, we hire production companies and they go out and make the work and we oversee it and then we put it. There wasn't, in some cases, we couldn't move fast enough, or we couldn't make as much content, or we couldn't do untraditional things as quickly as we needed to. We couldn't work in real time or at real speed of what our clients were asking. So I think in the beginning, the way Finn sort of, and I'm making air quotes, you can't see me, Finn started was, and I think most agencies started to do this a long time ago, have a couple editors around in case we need to cut something down or make a social thing or whatever. Have somebody who knows how to pick up a camera, and you just have a little bit, and you're still working with the larger production companies for things. But we started seeing, I think the first real thing that Finn in its early iterations came about. We were working with Champ Sports, which is part of Foot Locker. So we had Champ Sports and we had East Bay as part of those two brands. And we would, Champ Sports would have deals with athletes, right? So they have Nike and they have Adidas, and they would have production days with some of those athletes. So we'd get like LeBron for a day to do something, or we get Kevin Durant or Matt Stafford, whatever. And in the traditional model, you're making a commercial and they're on set, and then they, you break and you turn around and they go to their trailer for an hour and then they come back when you're ready. And we were like, God, we have these guys for all this time, and we're half the time they're sitting around doing nothing. What else could, so we started thinking about what could we do with them? So the creatives actually came up with this idea of a mix between a catalog and this was in the days of apps. So a catalog magazine format that was called Swag Magazine. And it was an app for free. And it had like the gear that you could buy, like laid out really cool and like in a cool catalog way. And then we had editorial content. We would talk to Kevin Durant about what his favorite hip hop songs were. We had Matt Stafford see how far he could throw a dinner roll. And we would just make these little side pieces of content. And then what we started to do was not just on the production day, we would go and get, the beginnings of what you'd call influencers or people, creatives. And we would go do little docs, or we would go do funny skits, or we would just make content in this editorial magazine. And we're like, oh, we can do this part at least ourselves. We don't need to hire, go out. There's a lot of talented shooters and direct, we can figure this out. So that was really the beginning of sort of our foray into production. And then, as social media became more of a thing, we realized, again, that's like a specialized language, right? You really need to understand and the platforms change, and they have different ways of talking, and even like a TikTok it's different, right? So we wanted to have people who specialize in that. And then as the networks are looking, the big networks are sort of adding all these pieces, we wanted to add more pieces. So Scale, which is our media thing, was a huge thing. And Grace Tang, built this division of media so that we could bring all these pieces together. So now we had the strategy, we had the creative, we had the account, we have the production, and we have the media, which is so important in the placement of where things go. And media has become so much more creative than it was before. Like the amount of different options you have of where to put things and how to engage people. And it's all, the more that those things all work together, and that network effect that we were looking for, building that on a small sort of nimble scale is sort of what we do.
That is a well-developed picture for this conversation. Do you agree that there is more opportunity for production companies to take on more of the partner creative development strategy role with brands?
I think you see it going every which way. I mean, I was just reading something about and I've been saying the same thing. Everybody's eating everybody's lunch, right?
Right.
There are production companies are absolutely bringing in creatives and strategists and doing work directly with brands. I see actually more of that than I see, and agencies are absolutely developing in-house production. I mean, you look at a place like Deutsch and Steelhead, they built a multi-million-dollar, studio operation post, this whole thing. 72 and Sunny did it for years. I mean, I think there is a lot of cross-pollination with all these things. And the differentiation honestly comes down to the work you do and the people you have and the expertise that you bring and the partnership, the connection with your clients that you make and what you're doing for their business. But I do think it is a change in, I've spent years coming from production to agency, from a very production lens, and my CCO is still like, that's not conceptual. You're thinking like a producer, not like a creative or it's just a mindset that you have to, get used to, or you have to recruit and bring in, or you just have to, open up sort of how you're thinking about things.
Well, and so that's it right there. What are some of those ways to open up your mind? So let's say you're an owner of a production company or a leader on a production team, and you see this opportunity and you want to take advantage of it. Maybe you think you have some of the strategic creative skills to pull that off. Maybe you're not just hiring directors, but creative directors, things like that, right? What are some of the cheat codes that you would recommend for someone that is considering this? Like, what are some of the top things? Where do you start from the top?
From a production company standpoint, it's sort of simple, right? I get the boards, I interpret the boards creatively. I'm like, oh, this cool shot would make a great thing and we could do this. And like, we're infusing what they're telling us strategically about the brand, but I'm still thinking more about my film, right? I'm thinking more about my filmmaking and how I'm going to make this cool. And that's okay. There's a reason there was that separation of church and state before, but I think if you want to turn that corner, you really need to start thinking about what am I doing for the business of the client, not like my, and Oscars and Emmys and award, that stuff is great, but what am I doing to drive the business results? What is the singular communication that we're trying to say, and where does that come from? What was the strategy behind it, and how is that sort of filling that thing? So if you go, it's really getting from a what are we going to make to a more insight driven, what was the insight? What are we trying to say? And how is that affecting the business? So like if you look at examples like the Old Spice, right? The man your man could smell like, right?
Right.
Was driven by a strategic insight that deodorant for men was mostly purchased by women, right? So Tom Cohn, like if you're Tom Coons, if you're the director at MJZ, and you're like, you get this script, you're like, oh, how do I make this cool? And I got this guy, and he's turning diamonds, and he's a horse, and I'm making that cool, right? But if you go back to the agency part of it, they're thinking like, okay, this is a story for women, but we're going to make it cool for guys who like kitschy, fun, craft of storytelling, but it's like hot actor guy who's going to be appealing to women and tell this story. But it starts with this insight and a big, conceit of how are we going to appeal to women for this legacy deodorant, right? So there's a bigger strategic thought and a bigger creative idea before you get to there's a guy and he's riding a horse, and he's riding a horse and he's making diamonds out of his hands. It's starting back a lot further.
Yeah, so you have to be real keen on knowing exactly who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, and who you're not talking to. And you have to make those bets, informed, as Deadpool would say, educated wishes.
Yes. Yeah, and you got to get past a lot of things and sell that. Half of getting a good idea made is selling that idea too, because there's a lot of hurdles that we spend on the agency side. There's there might be 6-8 months, a year of work going on before we're even mentioning it to a production company or a director. There's so much that happens before, again, like that's Old Spice and that's wine and that's the big leagues. There's the Hollywood version of that and there's the indie version of that, right? Somebody calls you up and they're like, we need a spot done and we have 3 weeks to make, and it's like you got to sort of do the same thing, but on a faster timeline. But it still is about starting from that was the big turning point for me anyway, from sort of filmmaking, whatever. You come up with an idea for a script and it's cool and it's fun and like this, but again, starting with that sort of consumer insight first and thinking about, like you said, the audience you're talking to, the media, where's the media going to get, all these things, starting back further in that and really thinking through those are super important if you want to go from production only to acting like an agency.
Are there any methodologies, books, tools? Obviously, it's people, right? We know, so having good people with experience, or people with that maybe client-driven kind of mindset. So assuming that you have something like that, or the people that are wanting to be like that, what beyond that in terms of actual tools or methods or understandings have you come to learn or see really effective from a production point of view into more of an agency, and what agencies use effectively?
Sort of in the same way that I was fortunate enough to sort of work on some Hollywood type movies, I think our experience or my learning working with the Coca-Cola brand was really inspiring and helpful to really understand, how it's supposed to work. Looking how the big leaguers do it. And the Coca-Cola brand had something called a CCI. It's the core creative idea. If I would have heard that early, I'm like, like the tagline, right? It's like open happiness, or like, just do it. But it's not. It's like going further back. The core creative idea is literally like, it's a longer thing. It's a sentence. It's not consumer facing. is how you explain to everybody what the North Star of the brand is. So a really good example would be, so MasterCard, something, they're priceless, which is a really fantastic campaign if you think about it, and the legs that campaign had for years and years and years. The core creative idea is not priceless. The core creative idea is something like everyday necessities, all things that you need purchased with your MasterCard. You contrast those with a lifetime moment, which you can't purchase, right? Like taking your kid to a ball game, or all the things that are priceless, right? So priceless isn't the core idea, but it's the things that money can't buy. That's sort of the creative idea. And then if you have a really good one, like a really good creative idea, like you see with the priceless, you can make endless scripts out of that. There are endless stories to tell. Like it literally, if you spend the time finding the right insight, maybe it was the insight was the universal truth of, money can't buy the most important things, right? That is a true insight. That is a way to get to people's like hearts, right? It's meaningful. And if you can unlock that, then you're not just writing, like the scripts will literally fall out of the tree that you've built with this idea, but it's taking a step back and going, like building planting the seed of the tree first, and then all the other stuff will fall out of it naturally, rather than like, oh, what's a good idea? Oh, like take a kid to the ball game. If you start there, it's great. Maybe you have one great story or one great script, but if you have this core creative idea and Geico or MasterCard or Nike, whatever, you can spend years and years making content that still feels fresh and interesting stories out of this one little piece, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's really smart and wise advice, is to find that core idea. I used to work for a company called Creature up in Seattle, and they, Jim Haven had this real great system, and the system always ended up producing a beautiful problem. And it was their version of the core creative idea. And the beautiful problem became the gospel for everything from that point forward. And it took a lot of work.
Yes.
A lot of strategy,
Yes.
a lot of thinking. I mean, I was surprised. It was tactile, it was digital, it was everything to try to get to what that beautiful problem could be, or the core creative idea. And then once you found it and the client understood it, it was the beginning of the campaigns right there. You could do a lot of different stuff. That's where I learned that. So I think really smart advice.
Again, and myself included, I would always jump, I'd hear a brief from a thing and I'd be like, oh, we could make this cool thing like this. And, again, my CCO or my ECD or somebody would be like, you got to start further back. We need a concept. We need an idea first, a conceptual thing that leans into something that's going to matter to people, some truth, right, about a product. You can't just, shill shitty products. There has to be some truth and some value in the product and why people want that.
To say you do think that you can, or you have come up with that core creative idea, you still have to sell it through. How do you do that? Do you have any ideas, any mechanisms, are there like any tools these days that really can test a campaign so that when you're selling it through to the different layers of decision makers for a client, they can see the evidence that this is something to build on? Do you have any experience or anything that you've pulled on that was worth sharing?
One reference I'll tell you, there's a documentary called Art and Copy.
Yeah.
If you ever is Doug Prey direct? Yeah. It's great director. But, some real legends, George Lewis, who was this amazing, outspoken art director, Esquire, launched Tommy Hill, all these great things. And he talks about, it's funny because he talked about it before I think Jordan Belfort and Wolf of Wall, the sell me this pen thing, right? He's like, give me that I'll sell you the fucking pen, right? But what they both talk about, I think, is, or what Belfort especially talks about, is the first thing I need to do is ask you questions, right? I need to know what you want, how long you've been in the market for a pen, what kind of pen do you usually use? Like, not just like, oh, this is my pen, here's how great it is, right? But really listening, right? I think is the first thing, listening to what it is. And we have all this data now, right? We know audiences, we know we know how people purchase when they're considering, all these things. And I think you have to use data as your friend, but you have to take it all, again, with a grain of salt, right? Because it can't always explain the sort of magic of an idea that's going to open up people's minds to something they hadn't thought of. But I do think you should come in and support it. Like, we went and talked to this many people. This study says that people think this. And a lot of times, what's really interesting, and our strategy team will tell you this, is that, what might be thought of as common wisdom is wrong, right? So don't take things at face value. Going back to the deodorant thing for Old Spice, right? You wouldn't have thought that 60% of people who are buying men's deodorant were women necessarily, right? So using that stuff and having that help support your argument, but it really is about like listening to, I don't know if there's a tool of magic. It's relationship, it's trust, it's all those things. Definitely bring some data with you. Don't just go, we think that blah, 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 because our guts tell us this, right? I think it's important to have some supportive information, and most real good insights as you're looking at it are some consumer thing.
The two data points that I've seen work pretty effectively to get ideas sold through is one is when you can show that you've talked to the customers of the client, right? The data somehow represents their customers or their competition's customers, right? Pairing it up against the competition that you're facing is also an effective way, either saying your competition's missing an opportunity or they're doing something right, but there's more to be had, or, and kind of bringing that into it. I find it's a great motivator for decision makers to really want to act on something when you've introduced those two, people, those two types into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. When you can find white space
That's
that
it.
other people, I mean, we were just talking about like whether it's men's deodorant bought by women, that all the other men's deodorant weren't going in that direction. We were talking about Dove Real Beauty. I don't know that the other brands in that space were talking about that sort of like reinventing beauty and standards and showing different kinds of people and different skin types and body type. I think they were really the first to do that. I mean, I was looking at, the Like a Girl campaign, which is another one, big sort of reframing of this idea of what is like a girl, right? Throws like a girl, and for a brand like Always, right? You wouldn't necessarily put those together, but looking at the competitive landscape, there was a white space, right? That nobody else in their space was doing that. I think that those are always opportunities to look around and, not just sort of do what everybody else is doing. If you can make a turn and find that those things that make your brand distinctive, and again, like really stand for something or come out about what you believe in as a brand, then I think that you have the possibility to make a difference in your marketplace and with consumers.
I knew a strategist once I worked with. She found this white space between craft beer and crush beer. She called it crush, like the frat party kind of thing.
I love that.
Yeah, and she found this white space that was so open that we just called around beer companies and said, we just discovered something that we thought that would fit, that could really fill that space. And if you want to hear about it, give us a call back, kind of a thing. And it worked. People were dying for it, and we ended up getting a client out of it too.
I love that. I've never done that before, where you find a white space just by happen. But you look at Liquid Death or something like that. Those guys absolutely blew open the water white space, right? Nobody, I mean, like when you go to the supermarket, there's so much water, right? But nobody else is doing water the way that Liquid Death is doing water. And the whole idea of death to, plastic, I mean, it's talk about, and, it's not surprising that those guys came from agencies.
Yeah, right. So this is really insightful. What about one of the things I love about Zambezi in your kind of your statements of what you do is talk about measuring work, right? Creative that gets measured. That is one of the biggest things I see production companies struggle with. I think it's important when you're pitching an idea that you talk about how you believe this campaign will take the client as close to, if not hit or exceed their goals as possible. That could be a desired outcome. It could be a a statement of we are going to achieve this if you do this. It's often ways to sell up, like you're spending $500,000, but if you spend $1 million, we can get you more. But it's really tough to feel that you actually can make a measurable difference when you are so far removed from the variables that influence that outcome. So do you have any tips for that?
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. You have to, in order to influence, you have to, again, get upstream. You have to understand what the business is, and you have to understand what the KPIs are, right? What are the results you're after? Because what I think a lot of brands do, and this is some of the bigger brands with like seasoned marketers, but especially with less seasoned marketers, is they want to tell all the stories at once on every channel all the time at the same time. And I think you really need to establish with clients, what are you do? Is this, we talked about the funnel a little bit. Is this an awareness play? Are you just building the brand? Do you just want people to know your name and have heard of you so that when they're thinking about the space that your product is in, that you're in that consideration? Do you want to be in the consideration set, or do you need to literally, some brands, if they're a startup and they need to be much more DR, they just need you to buy it. And you need, and maybe that's like Facebook ads or YouTube, and you're like, here's the product, here's why you should buy it. But that will only go so far, right? You need some bigger brand work. I think what we have been a longtime partner for Traeger grills, and they were a company that were very popular with a very niche audience, right?
I'm one of them. I own one.
Yeah,
by the way.
there you go. So grill, and they were like fanatic about this but they wanted to. It was a very specific thing that we did, was they wanted to grow from this core group, right? Which is different than if you came to me and said, nobody knows who our brand is, and we want to drive more sales, or we want people to know who we are. So we analyzed the shit out of the audience, right? Who were these people, and how, and in some ways, how could we use them as part of it, right? So there was influencer strategy that was part. How do we open up a bigger awareness, right, from this core group? And then ultimately, eventually that trickles down to sales at some point. But the first part was like, how do we get people to know that this brand exists? And not only that it exists, but that it is beloved by many, because part of the research shows, more and more people are not taking in advice or information from just sort of advertising telling them. They want somebody, somebody they know, or somebody they trust, or somebody they watch, to tell them that XYZ is good and you should use it. So we came up, again, like months of strategy and audience and whatever, and coming up with this bigger idea, this housing that was welcome to the Traegerhood, right? This idea of like a neighborhood where you are welcome, and we made all these different things. And that was, again, like we did a big, Super Bowl spot type thing and put it out in different places. But at the same time, we were doing also very localized out of home and like influencers. So there was like multiple touch points and multiple tactics used at different parts of the funnel and used in different ways. And I think what we established, because they were, the clients were fantastic. Todd Smith, who actually, going back, came out of that Coca-Cola, that training and that background of like really understanding marketing on a high level. And to their credit, again, understanding that we were telling different stories in different places to different people, right? And so we were making social videos that featured influencers and very like documentary, like regular people like grilling on Traegers and spreading the word. And then we had this very polished, with actors and things doing welcome to the, and it's all sort of laddered up into this bigger idea of the Traegerhood, that you are welcome, but it was seen in different places at different times by different people. And it worked. It was crazy that it was right around the time of the pandemic and all these things, and grilling became a thing. But I mean, it was massively successful. So
You made me think, it kind of inspired me to think about one method of perhaps being able to see yourself more in the outcomes of these campaigns could be to introduce A/B kind of testing, right? Like, hey, I think a smart way to go here would be we're gonna do one style this way, one style this way. You talk to your media buying team, we're gonna play it out in this way, and we'll know
100%.
performing. And based on that information, I think we'll try to, develop a campaign into 2 more episodes or whatever it might be, is a strong way to indicate to a client that you are thinking that way and that you can produce the work to actually test in their best interest and hopefully get results that succeed, right? That I think that could be a really strong play.
100%. And from a production lens, again, we need to be more nimble. We need to be more creative. We need to shoot and capture things in a way that they can be tested and broken up and tried in different formats, and giving options and shooting, 2 endings and shooting like different things. I think that the trick is, we're fortunate enough to have our media partners part of our company. Sometimes, now listen, not all of our clients work through our media services. And honestly, in some ways, and we play great with everyone in the sandbox, but it can be challenging when you don't have day-to-day knowledge of what is going on with the buys. If you have that, then it's great. I mean, with our clients at HealthAid, our media team we do a ton of A/B testing, and literally to like this color background or this all the way to like, different CTAs and different copy language. And it depends again, like how granular you want to get. But I think as a production entity, having those capabilities in-house to change things quickly, to try things, to make multiple versions of it and see what works in some places, that I think that's really important. And I think, you can get in your own way if you're a little too rigid about like, this is the only way it can be. You have to, going back to entertainment models, all big movies go to testing. They don't talk about it a lot, but they all go to, almost all of them go to testing. If you are into that kind of thing, you can read about endings of movies being changed, everything from Fatal Attraction to La La Land, to modern movies. The audience didn't like the ending. We got to change it to something that is more satisfying. I was just listening to a podcast about Election, one of my favorite movies. They shot, at least 1 or 2, if not 3 different endings, because the first one, just audiences were like, no, we don't. And I think it's tricky. I think you have to be careful about like focus groups and things like that. You have to take them with a grain of salt. And I think you have to let them tell you what might be working or not working, not necessarily let them tell you how to fix it. But if you do a marketing test of a piece of content or an execution or an ad or something, and 80% of the people go, I didn't understand what happened at the end.
That's all you need to know, right?
You can't ignore, you can't just go, well, they don't, what do they know? You have to take that seriously. And the worst thing that, we can do in advertising is not communicate clearly. Yes, we are creative. Yes, we can talk in metaphor. Yes, we can be symbolic. But if audiences don't understand what we're saying, and I think it's true in movies too, and entertainment and TV, and if people don't understand the point you're trying, they don't understand what you're saying, then you're not doing anybody any favors, no matter how cool or artistic or whatever it is. You're not communicating effectively. On the same thing, I think you can over rev on those kind of focus, and you can be sort of too beholden to it, because it's not a true, an audience that knows it's part of a focus group is going to have a stronger opinion than just people who are just watching casually in their living room while they're eating dinner and making a sandwich and doing whatever they do, right?
Yeah, they're forcing emotions to react.
They're forcing, and they're like, oh, I have to have an opinion about this. So it's okay, but take it, so you take it with a grain of salt, but there are things that are worth uncovering, and that I do think the audience and focus groups and testing can give you. I think your job, or our job, is in the interpretation of that feedback, that maybe it's not exactly literal, or it can, but how we interpret that is important. And that is, again, something I feel like, experience and doing it a lot of times, and really getting a feel for what those results are telling you is really important. And then, trying stuff. And if you start to see the things that you want out of it, then, obviously you're on the right path. And we have so much more ability to do that now than we ever have, like, clicks and pixels and all these things that you can do to see in real time what is going on with your ads. Is we've never been in that world, and it's only going to get faster and more sophisticated.
One thing that I think production companies have to their advantage is the experience, the equipment, the knowledge of how to film a lot of different kind of content, right? That's the advantage that they have. They may have more experience than agencies in this way and more expertise in this.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, and I think one of the great things that they can offer brand clients when they're working directly with them is to offer a whole suite of companion content, right? You talked about this with your story with the, sports players and taking advantage of them there. That's a great example. But if they thought more in terms of companion content for all of the different places media is seen and viewed and taken in now, I think that's a really strong sell, and it plays into the strengths, I believe, of production companies. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be. Listen, I think everybody has to think about that. Whether you're the production company, go, oh, you know what? We could also, while we're shooting this, we could also do these two things, and we could cut this differently. I think sometimes a production mindset can think of those things. A director or a producer can be like, oh, well, for doing this, we could double up and get this 3 versions of that, where maybe a traditional agency creative may or may not think of that kind of thing. I think certainly agencies are being tasked by their clients to create a ton of content with everything they do. But yes, I do think that production companies, and again, you see it both ways, and there's so many production companies that are now going straight to brand and bringing their production expertise. And I think it's attractive to brands to go like, oh, I liked working with that director. Why couldn't they come up with the whole thing and have it come through that talent? But I absolutely think that the capabilities of production companies and their resources can 100% help clients create more of the kinds of content. You just need to think through all the different needs of those contents, all the different channels they need to exist in, and sort of how those work. So maybe you're not shooting your anamorphic to end up as a 1x1 on Instagram or something. But, all these things are also, continually changing and keeping up with them. But yeah, I mean, I think thinking through the logistics and the practicalities of like, okay, we have one shoot day. How much stuff are we going to get? We'll get the script, but how much other things, and how can we make this modular, and how can we have options? And good directors know the drill of sitting there while the agency's like, can we do one more where but thinking through that in advance and suggesting those things and coming up with those in advance are great. And like, oh, well, we could do, 3 different endings here. We could do, all those things are great ways for productions companies to show their chops to clients, for sure.
Yeah, I love the term production mindset. We're sitting here talking about agency mindset, but it's obvious that there's a lot of value in that production mindset too. And I think if you are someone going after more direct to brand clients, bringing that together as part of your methodology and being able to articulate that, and I think that'd be really strong. It's a strong case to be made.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we say, and I see it. I mean, again, we see it a lot. Lots of top tier production companies who have amazing talent and creative directors. Again, some of them former creative directors are absolutely pitching themselves to, as that one-stop shop. Come here, we'll help you come up with the idea, then we'll go make it, and with this, these great directors you like. And we pitch ourselves at Fin Studios as a production company with the DNA of an agency, right? We can come up and show up and shoot your boards and give you a director that's going to help bring your vision to life. But we also have a little bit of an agency mindset where we understand all the things that you've gone through with this client. We understand what they're asking for. We want to help you on a deeper level. Again, when we're working with an agency or an internal creative, and we're just the production company, we want to understand all the things that get them there, and what the client is looking for, not just what we are as a production, a company are trying to create, but sort of bringing all that thing. And I think, I do think it can go both ways. Production companies doing creative and agencies, obviously, in some cases doing more production, and that's just sort of the way it's going these days.
Yeah, it's all morphing. Well, I feel like I could talk to you. I could talk to whoever runs the newsletter. I could talk to your social influencer team.
I'm sure they'd be glad to chime in.
I'm going to do a whole series.
You should do a whole
Zambezi.
series on all our different departments. Absolutely.
Yeah. 100 episodes for every employee.
Happy to do it.
Well, you've been so generous with your thoughts and your experience and what you observe and what you practice. Anything that I've missed here that you think is really important that listeners need to know about?
I mean, I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, it really is about partnership, right? I think that's what we take. One of our long-standing clients that I just came back from a shoot from TaylorMade Golf, we've 10 years. We've been with them, and every year we do a giant, what we call the super shoot, which is all their pros. We get them all together over 2 days and shoot literally almost all the content we're going to make for next year. So it's, 7 or 8 commercials, social content, literally the Christmas card, photos, every year is a giant challenge, but a very satisfying one. And again, those 10-year partnerships, you don't see those as much as you did in the old days, those AOR relationships. But it's about trust. It's about our values and what we are trying to do with them is aligned with what they are trying to do, right? We're not working at cross purposes. We are trying to satisfy their needs, but we're also being an objective outside eye. And so we build up trust, and we can talk openly with each other, and we can and talk about sort of what our goals are, and their goal, growing them from a $425 million company to a $2 billion company. That's super satisfying, obviously, for us, and super beneficial for TaylorMade and all their stakeholders. And that's really ultimately what we are trying to do, is help businesses grow and supporting them in creative communications and marketing to help them do that and achieve the goals that they have.
Alex Cohn, you've been so generous with your thoughts, and your experience. I started the show with the challenge of prying information out of you, but you were just a willing participant. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, James. It's really been a pleasure. I love your insights and your thoughtfulness is really helpful in these, and I love the podcast, and I'm happy to be a part of it. So thanks.
All right, to be continued.
Thanks, James.
Thank you for listening to Crossing the Axis with James Keblas. If you're interested in joining the conversation or have a topic you'd like covered, please drop a note at keblas.com. That's KEBLAS.com.